Right, so despite a resignation in protest at dumping mental health as a cabinet-level concern by one of the few shadow cabinet members actually qualified for their brief in Dr Rosena Allin-Khan, it's worth talking a bit more about Keir Starmer's reshuffle because this is his chosen team to go into the next general election. And so in that vein, it's perhaps no surprise that he's promoted even more right-wingers to more important roles. And if you want a flavour of just how Blairite things have become, look no further than Tony Blair superfan John McTernan, former special advisor himself, not a very good one, as Scottish Labour and the Australian Labour Party will attest to, but who you can always rely on to just say just that little bit too much by tweeting out excitedly 5 Blair-era special advisors in Keir's new shadow cabinet now, to which someone answered, should we prepare for war? And McTernan's reply of, only just wars, should, to anyone who thought the title of this vid was a little bit on the nose, that actually it really isn't. For those wondering who McTernan is on about, the shadow cabinet former SpAds are Pat McFadden, Liz Kendall, Peter Kyle, Hilary, Benn and Ed Miliband. Of these 5, only Ed Miliband remains unchanged in his brief. The other 4 have all been brought in or promoted in a sign of that rightwards lurch, though. Liz Kendall, the unapologetic Blairite candidate in the 2015 Labour leadership election, got shown exactly what the public thought of Blairism back then by only getting 4.5% of the vote, as Jeremy Corbyn absolutely trounced her, of course. Yet the guy who ran her campaign, Morgan McSweeney, learned a little bit from it, so that when he ran Keir Starmer's leadership campaign, for one, his presence should have set off immediate alarm bells, but for 2, we should not actually be too surprised they went down the road of pretending to be into Corbyn before veering straight back to their preferred Blairism, when the membership had already been tricked into backing Starmer and the damage was done, and it was too late. They don't want to work for us, this lot. They want to be just another establishment party waiting for their turn in power. Anywhere this McSweeney fella turns up, seems pretty clear it isn't going to be good for us. Well, Kendall has now been put in charge of the Department for Work and Pensions. How wonderful! So she's now going to be coming for the long-term sick and disabled. How do I know this? Well, one of the reasons she bombed in the 2015 leadership election campaign was because she was the only Labour candidate backing Tory cuts to social security at that point. And she backed the imposition of the Tory benefit cap, which has caused so much poverty, particularly in London, with the higher cost of living generally there, but of course everywhere else as well. Her reasoning then was because she couldn't see how she could oppose it without showing how an alternative could be paid for. Literally, as soon as she was appointed in this new post by Starmer, she was on the BBC, and after she was Work and Pensions Minister after the next election, why wouldn't she commit to free school meals for children? And again, she came out with, because if you make a commitment, you need to show how you will pay for it. Fine then, show us how you're going to pay for it then, Liz. That doesn't mean you shouldn't, though, should it? Like all Tories, she hides behind a myth of, we're broke, we can't afford it, despite being, apparently, one of the richest countries on earth. Tax the rich then. Clearly they're the ones who have all the money, because we don't have it, do we? No, sorry, the boss has ruled that out. We can't impose any new tax rises on anything anymore. Can't help you, sorry. That's what a vote for Labour and a Liz Kendall-run DWP will get you. Nothing but more misery. Hilary Benn, sadly, isn't his father, isn't remotely close, unfortunately. It's no wonder McTernan is so excited by his reappearance in Cabinet. Now he's been given the shadow Northern Ireland brief. McTernan's just wars comment might have been made with bomber Benn in mind, as he voted to go to war in Iraq and made a bonkers speech advocating the bombing of Syria during Corbyn's leadership, causing damage as it did to both the Syrian people and to Corbyn's leadership, which was, of course, the intent. Naturally, once all that was said and done, though, he never mentioned it again. Pat McFadden is now the party campaign coordinator. This guy was literally Tony Blair's former political secretary, and now he's running the election for the party, in effect. I wonder how he'll choose to do that. I can't possibly imagine. Starting with a rousing turn of things can only get better by any chance. Not with you lot in charge, it won't. Things will stay the bloody same. But for all of the promotions, those being demoted, they're looking at too. Lisa and Andy, for some bizarre reason, she keeps getting referred to as left-wing in the media. Well, compared to some of these other shits, she probably is. That doesn't make her left-wing at all. Just less right-wing than they are. Not right-wing enough. Blairite light, maybe. Soft left, they call her. Her own father called her right-wing for a start. And who can forget her comment regarding Jeremy Corbyn that we will break him as a man, when she doesn't much like his brand of actual left-wing politics. Anyway, karma's come for her, in my opinion. The word is Starmer wanted her ditched completely, but instead she got shadow cabinet post for international development, which is rather a joke because there's no longer a department for international development. Therefore, she's been demoted to shadowing a position that doesn't exist anymore. And she took it. Jonathan Ashworth is another one that's getting a dose of karma too. Having been demoted from the DWP to make room for Liz Kendall, that's got to hurt. He's now Shadow Paymaster General. That's where he's now gone. And then there is Starmer's eternally unmovable problem that is Angela Rayner. He can't get rid of her. She's elected. But she's now shadowing Michael Gove, the Shadow Levelling Up brief, which is pretty much the political equivalent of being the school milk monitor now. The fact she is also now officially Shadow Deputy Prime Minister is just a titular sweetener for effectively sidelining her. What Starmer has done is, without exception, stack his front bench overwhelmingly full of right-wingers. He's stuck with Rayner as the token lefty. He can't do anything about that. If you even believe she still is one, which, to be quite honest, I find debatable. But everyone else is absolutely anything but. This is an attempt at resurrecting Blairism on steroids, no question. Bringing it back into power in the belief that it makes you electable. But the election lead Labour currently enjoys is completely built on the Tories losing ground, not Labour winning it. Blair back in his day had a much broader church going into 1997, and the landslide he then won. He had John Prescott there, he had Robin Cook there, he had a few others, but Starmer, no, he doesn't want any of that. The other thing Blair had going for him was a personality. Whether you like him or you hate him, he did have that. Starmer doesn't. He's less lifelike than Pinocchio, and a lot less honest too. And he is to charisma what Albert's steptoe was to sex appeal. He's offering no hope, which Blair did, even if he didn't mean it. He has a cabinet now bereft not only of talent, but empathy and of moral scruples, and are in it for personal gain, as all Tories are. But he's also alienating more and more of the voter base. The left are largely gone, beating off not so much the soft left, but soft right, which you can quibble about as a definition as well, if you like, but it's more honest than the media are being about it. But by sending them packing too now, or demoting them, by abandoning serious areas of social concern, such as mental health, they are refusing to provide answers to the problems we face, as shown by Kendall's refusal to apparently stand or do anything, because apparently there's no money for it. And if John McTernan's crowing about just wars is anything to go by, they'll soon find money for that. This is a statement from Starmer that he expects to win the next election, that it's already in the bag, and can already get away with showing what an absolute shit he'll be in power. The arrogance is obvious to me. Blair got away with this too. He lost ground at each election he was in power for, but by and large it didn't matter with him because the Tories were led by absolute weaklings such as Ian Duncan Smith or William Hague. Starmer doesn't see it, but political diversity has grown since. He's getting pinched hard, not by the Tories, but by the Greens across the country. The local elections showed that. And if he thinks people will just keep on looking between his party and the abject cruelty of the last Tory administration should he become Prime Minister, I think he's going to be in for one heck of a shock. I think if he is as truly awful as I fully expect him to be, more people will be waking up to the fact that this duopoly between Labour and the Tories, where nothing changes, has to end, and a third option to rally around must be found. And that isn't going to be the Lib Dems, who have just enabled this pro-establishment farce to persist, just taking advantage of whichever party seems to be gaining the most ground. I believe the Green Party are far and away best placed to gain the actual ground needed. But what do you think? Impressed by this reshuffle, or is it as bad as you expected? Any good picks from amongst it, do you think? And why would that be? Do you reckon he's going to be as bad as Blair? Do you think he could be better? Or could he possibly be even worse? Let me know in the comments. Have your say and be part of the conversation. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where, for as much as polling points to a Labour landslide, recent by-elections show that where Labour are being expected to win, they aren't necessarily doing so. And not just at parliamentary level, but local level too. There's a Liverpool by-election going on right now. Anything in Liverpool, you would by and large expect Labour to win, but things are not looking peachy at all for Team Keith in what is supposed to be the reddest city in the country. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.